It is not something that people should say, oh, you know what, this is like the Green Bay, I don't need a piece of the Green Bay Packers. I mean, that trades as a stock. I don't want a piece of the Green Bay Packers. I want to make money.
Jim, hold on there. We want to go down to Bob Pisani from New York Stock Exchange. You know, Bob, as we sit here awaiting that first trade, we're all wondering, what's taking so long, Bob?
Yeah. Well, it's pretty obvious. This is an ongoing dynamic process. It's not a static process. The underwriters are sitting there with their hands and their ears on the phone saying, who wants in? We're getting close. We're closing it out. I've seen this many times with IPOs here on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And I think David is right. I did an informal poll yesterday about traders and where they thought it might open. Most of them were in the 50s. This is a little lower. So there's a lot of people who are saying, hey, I don't want in at 48, 49, 50, 52, but I am interested at 42. They're probably getting more orders in as a result of that 42 level we've been seeing, and they're having to deal with that. They're having to possibly adjust the price at this point. So this is an ongoing process, and it's fascinating to watch, you guys.
It certainly is, Bob Pisani. And Jerry, you got to wonder in terms of, we were talking about the retail investor wanting to hold on to this thing for the long term, but, the lockup is a major consideration. I mean, as Kramer points out, it's a stock, it is an investment, and the fact of the matter is that the free float is going to increase by about 55% in 91 days, and then it'll double about 151 days from now, according to BTIG.
Yep. And that's been known, and that's been known during the roadshow, and it's also been known that venture capitalists who had the opportunity to increase the amount of shares that they were selling on this transaction, Jim pointed out many times, they took that opportunity. I mean, I'm just getting emails. We're doing this real time, folks. I mean, you're talking about allocations to retail that are unprecedented. I mean, if you can see this, Melissa, we're not going to say here, but 1 million shares allocated, 7 million as an institutional hold. You're talking about sizable, David, retail allocation.
What difference does it make that there are so many banks involved in this? Does that add stability moving out? How does that change the dynamic of what now happens?
I think that, Simon, what it did was they can say that their objective was to make wide distribution. Minority firms, for example, I was told that a number of minority firms that some hedge funds had never done business with were offering and allocating shares early this morning.
What about the price action, though, from here?
The price action will not be necessarily influenced by the fact that it had the wide distribution, because ultimately, if you get shares and you want to sell those shares, where you got them from...
Do the banks have an onus to support the stock is what I'm really asking you.
And with this size of a deal and this type of liquidity, the answer is no. The answer is simply no. This thing is going to trade on its own supply and demand as soon as it opens. I don't think the banks have any stabilizing role here in any way, shape, or form. David, would you disagree with me? The banks are not going to try to stabilize this or have any influence.
No, I think you're right at this point. It's just too big. And
they did the deal. It's done.
They're done.
And again, as I'm looking at some of the distributions, the people are telling me what they actually got on the deal.
They got hit pretty big. I mean, usually you put in, as we heard, you put in for 20 million, hoping for 20,000.
I'm sort of shocked. And I'm looking at some of these numbers.
Right. The IPO process is gone, Carl, just so you know, and so we're anticipating that the trade could happen at any moment. So we're just sort of keeping that up there right now. Obviously, it has not unchanged 38. Won't last for long, though, Carl.
Hey, Melissa, I just want to note NASDAQ, guys, I just want to note, since 11 o'clock, since we've been standing here waiting breathlessly for Facebook to open, NASDAQ dropped rather noticeably, 28.25 to 28.15 here. So I think there is some effect from people anticipating moving money into Facebook and selling a few other shares at least. So we're not quite at the lows of the day on NASDAQ, but it did move down the last 15 minutes.
Right. Carl?
No, I was just going to say, echo Bob's comment on NASDAQ OMX. I mean, it's interesting how 15 minutes can mean so much to perception. A lot of questions this morning on Twitter in the last few minutes about, as you said, Melissa, what is taking so long, and looking at the possibility that perhaps this is not going to go as well organized as we thought. People are very impatient about this, given that the stakes are so high.
Yeah, and the crowds out here in Times Square, Carl, they are growing impatient as well. They continue to gaze up at the tower at the NASDAQ, waiting for that first trade as we stand here watching that $38 mark, of course. Maybe we should review some of the history that will be made when that trade opens. You know, $38 in shares were priced, $16 billion raised before the overall allotment. It is, of course, the third biggest U.S. IPO.
And Mark Zuckerberg. An iconic moment. An iconic moment that Visa and Enel never were. Let's be honest about it, the number one and the number two.
And this 28-year-old will be a $19.1 billion billionaire.
Or 542, with
exactly.
503 million shares. Well, you can do the math.
Yeah,
That's
and,
over
and
$20
as Carl had mentioned, every dollar above $38 will mean $4 billion extra in the hands of shareholders. That is why we were watching this so
Every
carefully.
$10.
Every $10, excuse me.
Because I was trying to think this morning.
Every $10 is $4 billion.
Well, was it only a year ago? Was it only a year ago that we were wondering whether Facebook would even go public? It was only a year ago, before that private transaction, David, where the whole issue was Facebook even going to go public.
Well, they had access to the capital
Yep.
markets everywhere they needed.
Yep.
They were generating cash, and there was an ability for insiders to sell it, given the growth of that second market. All that being said, once they got to at least 500 investors, they were going to be forced by the SEC to make certain disclosures. It didn't make sense for them not to go public. Not to mention, it was always going to go public someday. The question was, it was in no hurry. Yeah.
Right. Kramer, I know you're still on the phone.
Yeah, I'm getting nervous. I think I fear that people are saying, hey, it's not open yet, I can still get in. Let me go play some market order. There's the least sophisticated people are taking action right now. Once again, I think there's going to be another moment to be able to buy it. You don't need to freak out. You don't need to be at the opening. Please be tempered.
Be tempered, yeah. And of course, we've learned the lesson. We've seen what happened with the LinkedIn IPO, which doubled on the first day of trading on May 19th. It doubled, and then when the lockup expired, 10 days after that, it traded all the way down to 59, which is a low on the stock. It's since recovered, but that just goes to show you that there may be other entry points. There may be other entry points out there once the lockups go. And Gary, is this different though? Because there is a point to be made that this is such a large holding that people will have to hold on in order to just sort of be benchmarked, and it is a core holding as opposed to a lot of the other IPOs that have gone to market.
As you and I know, there's always that fear of not owning something.
Right.
No one will ever come and admit it, but there's also going to be that element of, I better own some of this just in case. And that will obviously play a role.
Could it be the next Apple? When it starts to gather momentum 2 or 3 years down the line, on that huge user base and the revenues, they can rise quite dramatically.
Let's throw out those numbers. Simon, we were chatting about this earlier. David, listen to these numbers. Melissa, I asked one banker who was involved in pricing this deal, how is the stock cheap at 38? And this was the answer I got. If you take all the users on Facebook, the 900 million users, you take the valuation at the IPO pricing of 38, this is why it's cheap. It values every user at 10 cents, a dime per user.
When the revenue per user, the average revenue
Not
per
revenue,
user.
just the actual.
Right, no, right.
That's going to be one of those metrics you're going to hear a lot about now. Taking a dime for every person in the world who is on Facebook as a user.
Carl? Yeah.
One of the strongest empirical arguments on the bear side is revenue per user. $5 for Facebook. For Netflix, it's $148. For Google, it's $30. So you can slice these numbers a bunch of different ways. I mean, on the bull side, you might argue, they have 48% of the worldwide internet population. They have 0.5% of worldwide ad dollars. So, I mean, look, those are going to get parsed in various ways long term. Has zero to do with what it's going to do when it opens in the next few minutes, potentially.
Yeah, and right, Carl, listen, not to mention 3.7 billion in 2011 revenues, incredibly high operating margins. I mean, operating margins like you just don't see anywhere else. They may come down a bit, and still a very significant growth rate, although people may have been concerned a bit about the seasonality that we saw in the business quarter to quarter, certainly fourth quarter to first quarter in terms of Facebook. And let's not forget, there is an overhang here. 91 days, you're going to have a lot more shares out there, lockups up. And then 180 days, you could have as many as 2 billion shares out there trading every day in terms of at least available on the float.
Still, despite all the caveats out there, within the NASDAQ market site, there's a celebration that is waiting to happen when that first trade is made. The champagne is poured, the glasses are out, and we're just waiting for that first trade to be made for the people here, not us. But the other people here to take a sit and celebrate. And Jim, that really puts it in perspective because yes, it is a stock, it is an investment, but right now Facebook also embodies a lot more than that.
Yes, that's true. Can I just say that I'm getting a little embarrassed here? I mean, 11 o'clock, let's get some little precision. This is indeed still a capital market, and you say you're going to do it at 11 and 11:05, and all this does is make me feel a little less certain again about what's happening. Don't like to see Apple reverse from being up 11 to up 8. I like all the ideas that people say, and it's a keepsake that I don't have to worry. I like what David said about the gross margins. Obviously, you as the user create the content, they don't. I come back to this mobile the mobile strategy that has not been articulated, the notion that as great as it is that you want to get all this information, is Sprint, and Dan Hesse is right, the CEO of Sprint, the government will not like the level of violation of privacy. Obviously, there's a lot of companies that push Facebook badly. Not everybody's in love with Facebook. There's some competitors. Let's just keep these in mind as we go crazy. If we buy it with no limit at the opening, which is the way, of course, you can. You can just tell the broker, listen, I don't care. It's any price you want. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Wow. Yeah. Carl, this is Gary. I think you were trying to get to me.
Well, as someone who knows the street,
Yes.
I have to ask you right now, what do you think's going through Greifeld's mind at this very moment?
I think he's a little bit concerned that they had put out a time call and that they're not adhering to the time. I think, and I'm just reading emails again here live, real time, they're going to say, Carl, that this is a good process and it's been delayed because they are trying to match. There's a lot of selling that's come in at the last few minutes, and they're trying to make certain that they open this at the right price. That's what I've been told.
Because we saw the 42, that's
Yes.
attracted selling in.
That's right. Once you get closer, Simon, to the actual print, a number of people that may have been sitting on their hands in terms of, okay, let me see where this thing is, have come in.
Does that imply that we could break 38?
There are people that think we may, Melissa. It's going to be very, very surprising. I would say, David, you'd be surprised, right?
Oh, I would be shocked. I mean,
You'd be shocked.
Well, it bid would be for the what's third largest IPO of all time, what the highest.
I can't imagine.
I can't imagine.
There are those that feel that. I can't imagine that's going to happen either. But